she whispered, "My baby," as the toddler clung to her apron. And when the other two echoed, "Mommy, Mommy," Joseph froze at the doorway, unable to breathe. It should have been a normal Tuesday morning. The sun had already broken over the California coastline, casting its golden rays across the white stone balconies of Hearst Castle, now owned by tech billionaire Joseph Clark, a man who could rebuild empires but still couldn't figure out how to make his children laugh. Upstairs, Joseph adjusted the cuffs of his navy suit. Sharp, precise, controlled. That's who he was, or who he used to be, before his wife died, before his world shrunk to 3 cribs, 3 high chairs, and 1 cold nursery filled with silence and grief. Downstairs there was noise, not chaos, not screaming, just the kind of laughter that didn't belong in a house this lonely. He followed the sound without thinking, briefcase still in hand, half a mind on the board meeting he was already late for, and then he saw her. Lillian. She was kneeling on the nursery rug in her blue and white uniform, yellow gloves still on, eyes wide with something between joy and heartbreak. In her arms was one of his sons, tiny fingers curled in her apron, his head resting against her chest. The child looked up at her and softly said, "Mommy." Her breath caught. She didn't correct him. She didn't laugh it off. She whispered it back like a confession she'd buried for years. "My baby." The second toddler clapped and joined in. "Mommy." Then the third. "Mommy." The room filled with a word Joseph hadn't heard in months. His hand gripped the doorframe. His heart stopped mid-beat. She didn't know he was there, and for a moment, neither did he. He was just a man watching the one woman he barely knew cradle his children like she'd lost them once, and just found them again. They say a house can echo with things left unsaid, but in that moment, it echoed with something else, something deeper than memory, stronger than shock, a word that didn't belong to her, unless it somehow always had. And listen, if you feel something right now, if a part of you is already asking, "Wait, what's her story?" then don't just watch in silence. Hit that subscribe button, because every time you do, you're telling us this kind of story matters, that love, loss, and truth still mean something, and honestly, that means more than views ever could. Joseph didn't speak. He couldn't. He stood at the edge of the nursery like a man stuck between 2 lives, one he thought he was living, and one that was unraveling in front of him. Lillian didn't notice him right away. She rocked the toddler gently in her arms, her fingers trembling, lips parted like she was about to say more, but stopped herself. "Look at you," she whispered, stroking the boy's curls. "You still got your daddy's eyes." Joseph's heart seized. The boy, his son, had his eyes. But how would she know that? Lillian looked up, and that's when she saw him. Her whole body jerked like she'd been caught stealing. For a full 5 seconds, neither of them moved. The triplets giggled in the space between them, completely unaware they were standing in the center of a storm about to break. Joseph's voice was cold, clipped. "Why did he call you that?" Lillian blinked. "Sir, you know what he said. You didn't correct him. And then you—" He swallowed hard. "You said it back." Her eyes filled, but her mouth stayed still. No excuses, no quick defense, only silence. That silence told him everything, and nothing. He stepped forward, fists clenched. "Is there something you need to tell me, Lillian?" She stood slowly, placing the child back down on the rug with care. Her hands shook. I was just comforting him, sir," she said, voice almost too quiet to hear. "Sometimes babies say things they don't mean." "No." His voice was sharper now. "They don't say mommy unless they mean it," he pointed at the other two, "and not all 3, not unless they know something." The room grew heavy. The air between them thickened. Lillian's lips parted again, and for one fleeting second, Joseph saw it. Not guilt, not shame, pain. A pain that ran deeper than any maid should feel for her employer's children. She turned her back to him, just slightly, wiping her eyes. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. I never meant to feel anything. I came here to work, that's all." He stepped closer, slower now. "Then why do they call you that?" She turned back, and this time she didn't try to hide the tears. "Because once upon a time," she choked on the words, "I was someone's mother." And just like that, everything shifted. The room wasn't a nursery anymore. It was a confessional. And Joseph, for the first time in years, was no longer in control. Joseph didn't say a word. He just turned, walked out of the room and closed the door behind him, not slamming it, not storming, just shutting it. Quiet. Too quiet. Upstairs he poured himself a glass of whiskey. 9 in the morning. Didn't matter. His hands were still shaking. "Because once upon a time I was someone's mother." Her words looped in his head like a broken record, but they didn't make sense. Not here, not in his life, not in this castle where every role had been defined, and Lillian was supposed to be the help, not the heart. He stared out at the Pacific Ocean. Somewhere out there was the life he used to know, the man he used to be, the wife he'd buried, the children he still didn't know how to raise without her. He wanted to write it off, a misunderstanding, a mistake. But he couldn't, because his children never cried when she held them, because they ran to her when they were scared, not him, because one of them had started calling her mommy weeks ago and he thought it was just confusion. But what if it wasn't? Downstairs, Lillian stood still long after he left. She could still feel the weight of the toddler against her chest, still feel the way his tiny hands gripped her apron like he remembered her heartbeat. And maybe he did. She hadn't meant to slip, hadn't meant to whisper the truth aloud, but it had burst out of her like a crack in the dam she'd been holding shut for 2 years. "Once upon a time I was someone's mother." She knew what Joseph thought now, that she was crazy, that she'd crossed a line. Maybe she had, but there was something she hadn't said, something she couldn't. Not yet. That night, Joseph sat across the long dining table. The triplets babbled, mashed sweet potatoes into their hair, and clapped for no reason. Lillian entered quietly, carrying a plate. He didn't look at her. "You can take the rest of the night off," he said sharply. She hesitated. "But the kids, they'll survive." She didn't argue, didn't plead. She just nodded, left the plate, and turned to go. But before she disappeared through the kitchen doors, he said without looking up, "If you know something about them, about my kids, you'd better tell me the truth, Lillian." There was a long pause. She didn't turn around. She just said, "I don't think you're ready to hear it." And then she was gone. They were both clinging to control. Him, to logic. Her, to silence. But neither of them could outrun the truth much longer. The storm came in just after midnight. Not thunder, not lightning, just a steady California rain that turned the air cold and the castle quieter than usual. A weather alert buzzed across Joseph's phone. Mudslides near Highway 1. Roads were closing. No one in, no one out. Most of the staff had already gone for the weekend, except Lillian. She lived in the servants' quarters behind the west wing, barely 300 feet from the nursery, but now the only adult besides Joseph left in the entire estate. He hadn't spoken to her since dinner, hadn't even looked at her, but at 2:16 a.m., a baby's cry shattered the silence. Then another, then another. Joseph sat up in bed, heart pounding. He waited, hoping it would stop. It didn't. When he reached the nursery, he found her already there. Lillian cradled the smallest boy, rocking him gently, singing something under her breath. A lullaby Joseph didn't recognize. The other two sat in their cribs, wide-eyed, clinging to their blankets. She looked up when she saw him, her face tired, her hair slightly undone, real, human. "You weren't supposed to be on shift," he said, voice low. "I wasn't sleeping," she replied softly, "and they were crying." Joseph hesitated at the doorway, then stepped in. He picked up one of the other toddlers, awkwardly, stiffly, like someone handling something delicate but unfamiliar. They cry more when it rains, Lillian said after a pause. It's like they remember something. Joseph looked down at his son. What could they possibly remember? They're not even 2. Lillian didn't answer, because she knew. They remembered warmth, a heartbeat, a voice they'd heard once before and didn't forget. Her. Later, they sat on opposite ends of the nursery, each holding a sleeping child. The rain tapped against the windows like a second heartbeat. Joseph broke the silence. I wasn't always like this, you know. She looked at him, surprised. I used to think I could fix anything, he continued. Money, pain, time. Then Claire got sick, and nothing worked. Lillian's voice was barely above a whisper. Sometimes, nothing is supposed to. He met her eyes. Who were you before all this? Her breath caught. She looked down at the child in her lap. I was a mother, and a wife, and then, not anymore. For the first time, he didn't push. He just let the silence sit between them, full, heavy, honest. At this point, what do you think Joseph should do? Follow his pride or follow his heart? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The hardest part is still to come. The rain had finally stopped by dawn, but inside Hurst Castle the storm was still sitting in the air, thick, waiting, unresolved. Lillian moved through the halls with a quiet grace. She didn't expect to see him this early, but she did. Joseph was standing by the old piano in the main hall, barefoot, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept. Neither had she. He turned as she passed. Stay. She paused. I need to ask you something, he said, and I want the truth this time. Her shoulders stiffened. Joseph walked over, holding something in his hand, a photo. It was worn at the edges, faded, the kind of photo you keep in a wallet for too long. Where did you get this? He asked, voice tight. Lillian stared at it. It was a photo of her, younger, with a round belly, smiling, in front of a small house. A man beside her, holding her waist. The date, 2 years ago. She hadn't seen that picture in forever. Joseph's jaw was clenched. I found it in the attic. It was mixed in with Claire's things. Did you know her? Silence. And then, Lillian nodded. Yes, I knew Claire. Joseph blinked. Lillian looked away, her hands trembled. She was my best friend in college. We lost touch. Life happened. A long pause. And the man in the photo? Lillian swallowed hard. My husband, Marcus. Joseph's eyes narrowed. Marcus who? Marcus Clark. The words hit like a freight train. His throat tightened. That's not possible. Lillian looked up, tears sliding down her cheeks now. I was married to your brother, Joseph. Everything fell into place at once. Claire, the photo, the reason she looked at the children like they were part of her soul, because they were. Joseph stepped back, like the floor beneath him had cracked. You're telling me, these kids? No, Lillian interrupted gently. They're not mine biologically, but... She reached into her pocket, pulled out a faded birth certificate. Mother, Claire Evelyn Clark. Father, Marcus J. Clark, legal guardian, appointed, Lillian M. Lawrence. She looked at him, broken but calm. Claire asked me to raise them if anything ever happened to her and Marcus, but after they died, your lawyers took them. Said a maid wasn't fit to be a guardian. Said I had no rights. She wiped a tear. So I let go. I disappeared. Until one day, a job listing came up for a maid at Hurst Castle, and I applied, because I just wanted to see them again. Joseph stood there, stunned. The empire he thought he controlled, built on a custody battle he never even knew he'd won. And suddenly the words mommy and mommy weren't just cute baby talk. They were memories, echoes, truth calling out through little voices. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky above Hurst Castle in gold and lavender. The kind of sunset that made you stop and forget, just for a second, how messy life could be. Joseph sat on a stone bench in the courtyard. Lillian walked out slowly, a blanket over her shoulder, and the smallest triplet asleep in her arms. The other two toddled beside her, giggling, sticky with applesauce and sunshine. He didn't say anything at first. She didn't either. But she sat down next to him, the child still sleeping on her chest, and for once there was no need to explain why. "I didn't know about any of it," Joseph finally said, voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "About the guardianship. About you and Marcus." Lillian nodded. "I figured. Claire never got to tell you, and I didn't come to cause trouble. I missed them." He looked down at one of the toddlers who had crawled onto his lap. "You loved them like they were yours." "They were mine," she said softly. "Not by blood, but every way that matters." Joseph stared out across the hills. "I'm not good at this," he confessed, "being a dad. Most days I feel like I'm faking it." Lillian gave a gentle smile. "All the best ones are. It means you care." He looked at her then, really looked at her. Not like the help, not like a problem to fix, but like someone who had suffered and still stood. Like someone who had loved and lost and loved again anyway. The toddler on her chest stirred, tiny hand reaching for her cheek. "Mommy," he whispered. Joseph tensed, but this time Lillian didn't flinch, and Joseph didn't stop him. She kissed his forehead, and for the first time in months, Joseph smiled, not the kind he wore for cameras or board meetings, but the quiet, aching kind, the kind you wear when you realize the universe might be giving you a second chance. They sat like that for a while, no more words, just warmth, just being. Until finally Joseph asked, "Do you think they remember you?" Lillian nodded without hesitation. "Babies know love. Doesn't matter how long it's been. And if this moment made your heart pause, if you felt even a flicker of what these characters are feeling, then don't just keep watching in silence. Tap subscribe." These stories aren't just fiction. They're about what we all wish we had the courage to say. And maybe, just maybe, what we still have time to do. The peace didn't last long. The next morning, Joseph was on a call with his legal team, a call Lillian didn't mean to overhear, but once she heard her name, she couldn't unhear it. She never filed official guardianship papers, just a verbal agreement, nothing legal. And no blood ties, the lawyer said through the speaker. Technically, she has no claim to the children, and with your name on the adoption record, Joseph, she could be removed immediately if that's what you want. There was a long pause, then Joseph's voice. "I understand. Just draw something up. I'll review it." Lillian stood in the hallway, paralyzed. He knew now. He had the truth. And still, he was preparing to make her leave. By the time Joseph walked into the nursery, she was already packing her things. He froze. "What are you doing?" She didn't turn around. "You said you'd review the paperwork." He took a step forward. "Lillian, don't." Her voice was sharp. "You don't have to explain. You're protecting what's yours. I get it." He looked at her, confused and angry. "You think I'm trying to take them from you?" "You're not," she asked, finally turning to face him, eyes brimming with betrayal. "Because that's not what it sounded like to me." "I was just trying to understand the situation." "No," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "You were trying to erase me again." The word again hit him like a slap. "You think I wanted any of this?" he said, voice rising now. "You show up out of nowhere, act like these kids are yours, like this house is your home." "I never claimed the house," she whispered, "just the right to love them." He stared at her, breath heavy, jaw clenched. "You should have told me everything from the start." "I couldn't," she snapped. "Do you know what it felt like, watching them from a distance? Cleaning floors while they ran past me, calling me nothing. Watching you, drowning and not being allowed to help." "I couldn't, Joseph, because your people told me I wasn't enough." Silence. Painful. Dense. The smallest triplet wandered into the hallway. "Mommy," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Joseph and Lillian both turned, and in that moment, everything felt too loud, too fragile. She knelt, held the boy close. then looked up at Joseph. "I'll be gone by noon." And just like that, the bond they had started to build cracked in half. This time she didn't whisper, "My baby." She just kissed him on the head, like someone already saying goodbye. The castle was quiet again, but not peaceful, the kind of quiet that follows a slammed door, the kind that crawls into the corners of your mind and forces you to sit with your regret. Lillian folded the last of her uniforms into a small suitcase, one bag. That was all she had. Not because she owned so little, but because everything she wanted couldn't fit in it. She walked through the halls slowly one last time. Her footsteps echoed over the marble, past the family portraits, the polished railings, the rooms she had cleaned every day, but never truly belonged in. But her heart was still upstairs, with them, with her boys. She stopped outside the nursery door, hand pressed to the wood. She didn't open it. She didn't trust herself to. Across the castle, Joseph sat in his office, staring at a document he couldn't bring himself to sign. Termination of employment, Lillian M. Lawrence. Everything was ready. All he had to do was finish it. Click, done, over. But he couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. "I never claimed the house, just the right to love them." And suddenly none of this felt like power. None of it felt like protection. It felt like punishment for something she didn't deserve. He opened the drawer where he'd placed the birth certificate. Her name handwritten in black ink, next to the words legal guardian. She had tried to do everything right. She'd honored Claire's wishes. She had come back into their lives not for herself, but for the children. And he had treated her like an intruder. Downstairs, Lillian picked up her bag. She turned once to the mirror. No tears. Not this time. Just resolve. She had survived worse. But as she reached for the front door, Joseph stepped into the hallway. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her, really looked at her. Same uniform, same bag, same woman. But now, he saw her fully. "Don't go." Her hand gripped the doorknob. "You already made your choice." "I was scared," he admitted, "not of you, of what it meant, to need someone again." She turned. "I never needed your permission, Joseph. I just needed your trust." He stepped closer. "I can't raise them without you, and maybe I don't want to." It wasn't a grand gesture, no flowers, no speech, just a man standing in his own pride, asking someone not to walk away. 1 week later, the castle felt different, not quieter, not louder, just warmer. The kind of warmth that doesn't come from sunlight or chandeliers, but from laughter echoing in the halls and the smell of pancakes at 7 a.m. Lillian stood in the nursery, buttoning up one of the boys' little overalls, while the others giggled and rolled around on the rug. Her hair was down for once, her eyes were soft, her smile unguarded. Joseph leaned against the doorframe watching them, not frozen this time, just full, at peace. "You know," he said, stepping in, "you never actually told me what that lullaby was." She looked up, surprised. "You remember it?" He smiled. "I remember everything now." She hesitated. "It's the one Claire used to sing, back in college, when we used to talk about kids someday. She said if anything ever happened to her, she wanted them to hear it from me." Joseph's throat tightened. "Then keep singing it," he said. "They deserve to remember where they came from." He walked over, knelt beside one of the toddlers, the smallest one, the one who always clung to Lillian's apron. The boy looked up at him with big, curious eyes, then turned toward Lillian, reached out and whispered again, "Mommy." But this time Joseph didn't freeze. He smiled. He looked at her and nodded. "Yes," he said gently. "That's your mommy." Lillian's breath caught. Her hand covered her mouth, not from shock, not from fear, from relief, from finally being seen. She knelt down, pulling the child into her arms, and the other two piled on top. Joseph stood and stepped back, giving them space, watching the scene unfold, the most beautiful thing he'd ever built, and almost destroyed. That night, they all had dinner together at the long dining table. No more separation. No more job titles. Just family. After the kids were tucked into bed, Lillian walked out onto the balcony. Joseph joined her, leaning over the railing, hands in his pockets. The ocean stretched out beneath them, moonlight glinting on the waves. He spoke first. "You think they'll remember all this?" Lillian smiled. "They already do. Not the details, but the feeling. Children always remember love, even when they can't explain it." He nodded slowly, then looked at her, eyes heavy with gratitude, and something else, something like hope. "You think you could ever forgive me for almost pushing you away?" She met his eyes, no hesitation. "I already did. The moment you called me their mother." And once again, the house echoed with the word mommy, but this time it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It was truth. And it was home. Do you believe true love, even the unexpected kind, can survive after being tested this hard? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this moment hit something deep, don't leave without subscribing. These stories remind us that even in real life, sometimes people do come back.